it is my pleasure to welcome you to this discussion this morning. This session will provide insight on public support for Indigenous tourism. We will explore how governments throughout the region have worked to support Indigenous tourism, including how ministries of tourism have engaged with Indigenous communities to develop and integrate their tourism products into the local, state, and national tourism product offerings. We acknowledge the challenges that COVID has presented to the tourism industry. We've pretty much been shuttered, and that presents particular challenges. I would like to take this opportunity now to introduce and to allow my co-moderator, Mr. Anthony Rodman, to take the floor and introduce himself.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. It is an honor for me to be here today with this panel of leaders and people that are doing such important work with Indigenous communities and tourism. Again, my name is Morgan Rodman. I am the Acting Director of the Office of Indian Energy and Economic Development at the Department of Interior. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and the Osage Nation as well. Those are my Indigenous communities. And on behalf of Indian Affairs, we are so proud to join the Organization of American States and George Washington University in this first ever Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas. And again, I look forward to the discussion. There's so much wisdom here. And with that, Kim, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. And it is my pleasure now to introduce our distinguished panel of ministers. Minister Iván Eskildsen, the Honorable Minister of Tourism of Panama, is a Panamanian entrepreneur with experience in the development of projects focusing on Panamanian culture and sustainability. Minister has extensive experience working on various projects in Panama, looking at particularly in the Azuero region. Secondly, we have Minister Valdez, Morena Valdez, the Minister of Tourism of El Salvador. Minister Valdez is an academic researcher, business administrator, communicator, and public relations expert. Much of her career has been devoted to studying marketing and advertising, focusing on promoting the image of El Salvador. We also have joining us Minister Rosi Prado de Holguín, Minister of Tourism of Ecuador. Before assuming office, she was manager and legal representative of Air World Travel, AWTSA, a company focused on developing global partnership and dialogue with airlines to open new business markets to potential customers. Her experience in the airline industry extends to American Airlines, Eastern Airlines as manager of reservations and tickets at Braniff International, and commercial manager of TEM, the national airline of Ecuador. She has previously served on various private sector and public sector boards. We're also joined by Mr. David Flute. He's the Secretary of Tribal Relations of South Dakota in the United States. Secretary David Flute is an enrolled member of the Seston Walperton Sioux tribe. Prior to becoming Secretary of the South Dakota Department of Tribal Relations, he was chairman for the Seston Walperton Oyate and served as the Lake Traverse Councilman. Secretary Flute graduated from North Dakota State University with 2 social science degrees and was a member of the American Honor Society, Phi Alpha Theta. He's a military veteran and served in Afghanistan between 2006 and 2009. He believes that the Dakota values of duty, honor, respect, self-service, honesty, and bravery are similar to military values. We also hope that we are already joined, if he's not already with us, but we'll soon be joined by Minister Cozier P. Frederick, who is the Minister of Environmental, Rural, and Modernization, and Kalinago Upliftment in the Government of the Commonwealth of Dominica. He was a co-curator for the Kalinago All Lives exhibit in the Smithsonian Museum of the North American Indian North American Indian in Washington, D.C. He's an educator, a martial artist, a musician, visual artist, researcher, and has published 2 articles in Dominica's Reunion 2018 commemorative magazine on the Kalinago territory since independence, the Kalinago language. We welcome Minister Cozier. So, ministers, we welcome you to this dialogue. We look forward to your participation and your engagement. I will delve right into the dialogue without further ado, and I will begin with questions for each minister on how, if you could set for us the context for indigenous tourism in your country, how do you see indigenous tourism within your context of your countries? I will give each and your state, and as well as your state in the case of Secretary Flute. If you could give us some context, I will open the floor for that opening dialogue between and among our ministers. So I will now give the floor first to Minister of Panama. If you could please, ma'am, please, sir, share with us your perspectives on indigenous tourism within the context of Panama.
Thank you. For us, indigenous tourism is certainly a very much a priority right now. Panama is not well known for our indigenous culture, internationally speaking. However, we definitely want to change that, considering that we have 7 live indigenous cultures within the country. And Panama being such a small country, it's very easy to reach these indigenous communities. Each of these 7 live indigenous cultures have their own culture, their own traditions, their own cosmological knowledge, their own ancestral traditions on botanics and other ancient wisdom. And in this case, our indigenous communities have remained in a way a bit isolated for the last century. So that has allowed for the culture to remain very pristine and very connected to that remote past. So this is something that for today's traveler, we think it is very, very interesting how, because they are looking for those types of significant experiences and also connection with authentic cultures in general. So we are definitely betting very much so on this possibility of bridging the gap between this very much unknown factor so far of Panamanian culture with regards to our indigenous peoples. And we definitely think this can be a very big opportunity because many of these communities have been actually offering tourism services for years now. So actually what we have been doing is approaching, ever since we started our administration in July 2019, we have had an approach to the main indigenous communities in each of the 7 cultures, and we have organized a tourism circuit called Indigenous Panama. So this is something that is already involved and approved in our sustainable tourism master plan towards the year 2025. So again, a very much a priority in our plans right now is how we can work together with these communities and to offer these experiences. These are very much authentic experiences to the travelers that come to our country.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister, for that. And I will now go to Minister of Tourism of El Salvador. Honorable Valdez, you have the floor.
Gracias. Bueno, un saludo a todos los colegas que están.
Thank you. I give a warm welcome and my honor to be here. I want to say hello to you as the Ministry of Tourism of Salvador, but also as the President of an association of the Maya community, where there are many member states that are considering the role of our ancestors to promote culture and, of course, tourism. Each of the member states of this organization has specific policies on tourism development. Also, at the regional level, we are promoting agro-tourism and ecotourism at a community level, in which the communities has a larger participation and a better improvement of their resources, their natural resources, their technical and agricultural techniques, also their crafts activities and their ability to create jobs. For Guatemala is as important the development as well as the preservation of the natural resources and the resources of the whole region and the culture. So one of the plan that we are creating in this region that is also following the World Tourism Organization guidelines is to develop the indigenous communities through the economic contribution this tourism creates, especially the domestic tourism. That is the first step where we are giving in this economic recovery in this context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Within this organization, within the framework of this organization, we are developing the tourism focus on the proper fostering of tourism that is sustainable and that is inclusive. So there is an action plan, various action plans we can mention, like touristic pathways, like in the ones we created in Belize. Also in Salvador, we work along the Ministry of Culture. This is one of the challenges the countries of the region have to work within different levels and within the public and the private sector to work alongside. As Iván was saying, Panama has a great experience in the indigenous tourism because they have been working for a lot of years, as well as Guatemala, our neighbors. So in the case of Salvador, we are working alongside the Ministry of Culture. We are currently working to strengthen the institutional structure in El Salvador. In Salvador, we have the World Heritage of uh, UNESCO, also protection works and plans that the Ministry of Culture has. In fact, they have a specific office for the um, caring of those resources and the cultural expressions like dances and crafts, languages, knowledges, ancestral techniques, agricultural techniques. So we are working alongside. From Salvador, we want to leave this tool, this resource that all countries need to work institutionally, work together, because not all of us have a Ministry of Culture and Tourism or different structures. Peru has this structure or Colombia has this structure, but many others don't. So we need to work alongside. We are not islands working for a sole goal. We need to recover the interest of our tourism, of our communities. We need to have the identity of our place of origin. We always mention all the colleagues of this region. If we do not know from where we came from, how could we be proud of that place, and how would we promote the tourism and that identity we have? So usually the countries that have been working on their identity are usually the ones that are more relevant for terms of tourism. So um, together with me is our director that is also will be talking from Salvador.
Minister. Thank you so much, Minister. I totally take the point of working intersectorally. That is an important point. I'd like to hand over now to Secretary of Tribal Relations, Secretary Flute, to give us his state's perspective on Indigenous tourism. Secretary Flute, you have the floor.
Oia, mitaki api. Oia, tukahea Duen atateo na namichihu wopirai chichapi. Naha duen ataku invite maku omanichi wiuhapte de nina yomakpi. Na taku iwonda kapikta taku indigenous tourism iwonda kapikta. Naha de tokata kia taku yate ki washteshte de ta yachpikta. For those that cannot interpret the language of the Dakota people, I just wanted to say that I greet each and every one of you with a handshake from my heart, and to George Washington and the Indigenous tourism community for inviting me to be able to participate and share some perspectives on Native tourism. So Indigenous tourism across the United States has each Native tribe has their own unique history and their own unique culture. And my perspectives today are shared from the Great Plains region up here, where you see predominantly the members of the Dakota, Lakota tribes, more commonly known as the Great Sioux Nation. But I also want to acknowledge the other tribes in our area that might be listening, our neighbor tribes from the Anishinaabe Nation, the Mandan, Hidatsa, Rikara Nation, and any of the tribes, Winnebago, Omaha tribes up here. And so our history is very unique, and incorporating Indigenous tourism into our state is it's an opportunity to enhance our alliances and our partnerships with our state governments, with our local governments, with other tribal governments. And we're in a unique time here to grow in Native tourism. So I think it's an exciting time, and there are different pieces of legislation that the United States government established, recognizing our tribes in a very honorable and respectful manner, and so we will be talking a little bit about that later. And so we have just like other cultures and peoples of this world, we share a very old school and unique history here, where, you know, as you heard me speak in our language, the language of the Dakota, we still have our language here. We have our culture and our history, and it's those types of attractions that we want to share with the outside visitors that are wanting to visit South Dakota and the Great Plains region. We have a very colorful language, very colorful culture, and we're excited to do what we can to improve that visitor experience. So I want to say thank you before I forget, and I think the conversations are going to be loquacious. They're going to be talked about a lot, but I just do want to give a shout out to George Washington University, and just want to say thank you to each and every one of you that are on this panel. I'm very humbled and I'm very honored to be a part of this with such esteemed people throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Flute. Indeed, we're happy to have you join us. I would like to now give the floor to the Minister Cozier Frederick, Minister of Kalinago Affairs of Dominica. Minister Frederick, welcome.
Thank you so very much from Waiti Kubuli, which is the indigenous name for my island. I want to first start off by saying I'm happy to be part of this conversation, and to remind the world that there are indigenous peoples in the Caribbean. We were not totally wiped out, so we do exist. One, and we have been assimilated into the population for a long time. And we are part of what is commonly referred to as the Creole culture, and what I have argued many times and with a lot of evidence for it is the fact that the Creole culture, which we now speak about on the island of Dominica, is built on three pillars: 18th century European designs, 18th century African ancestry, and also 18th century Kalinago. So what is now immersive and very popular as a Creole culture has a very strong indigenous pillar. It's very, very important to know that. And in saying that, I want to make it clear that the government of Dominica is very much appreciative of the indigenous population. We have been able to survive within that space for a couple of millennia. We appear to be going nowhere else. We are part of the resiliency of the Caribbean basin, and the conversation is now moving toward expressing more of that indigenous heritage, and hence it lies heavily on the product as it relates to tourism itself. So what we do have on the island, it's a remnant of that once powerful civilization. We do have a reservation, and within that reservation, we have trappings of the former aspects, the pre-colonial aspects. So we do have a massive cultural village, which in itself serves as both a laboratory for investigations by our indigenous peoples, and also a showcasing of that experiences to the outsider. Very, very important. Because we argue within the government that we should not only provide for the visitor, but we also should provide for the people who actually live in that experience. So we do have that, and we are on the verge of this sort of new rebranding of our island, because whenever we travel, we get confused with the Dominican Republic. And one of the arguments is that our island was called Dominica because it was discovered on a Sunday by chance, or sighted on a Sunday by chance. So we argue that if it was sighted on a Monday, what would have been the name? Or Tuesday, or Wednesday? But the Kalinago name that exists for it, which is Whitey Kubuli, meaning tall is a body, stands today. So we're sort of rebranding, and it's something that we have to do, because we have to show a clear differentiation between the Dominican Republic and ourselves as islands within the Caribbean space. We also have a very strong tourism community tourism component, where the government, the Ministry of Tourism itself is pushing this, and basically it is an immersive sort of experience, where people go into various communities around the island and immerse themselves in the food and the beverage, in the local customs, and a big highlight of this is the Kalinago experience, where the trappings of the existing material culture, like the canoe building and the artistry and the weaving, it's all highlighted, and we're expecting the experience to provide a source of livelihood for our people, while also expressing to the world that we do exist and we do have a wonderful community.
Thank you.
We do have these experiences. So I just want to say I'm happy to be here to within the conversation to tell more, to tell a little more of the existence of our people within that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I also hail from Waitikavuli, so I'm very pleased to have you join us in this conversation. And finally, I would like to offer the floor to the Honorable Minister Rosi Prado de Holguín, Minister of Tourism of Ecuador. Minister, tiene usted la palabra.
Thanks very much, Kim. A pleasure to be with you again. Todos reciban un cordial saludo
May
de
you
nuestro...
all receive a warm regard from our President, Lina Moreno Calcel, and of all of us who are part of the Ministry of Tourism of Ecuador. It is an honor and a great opportunity to be part of this initiative organized by the Executive Secretary of the OAS for the Development, Integral Development, and the Institute of Indigenous Studies of the GWI in coordination with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Ecuador is one of the most diverse countries in the world, and to take care of this heritage is part of our priorities. That care can only be guaranteed with the support of the communities that live, work, and make the rural communities go forward. Settlers know better than anybody else the wonders that the treasure that is treasured in the territories and their cosmovision and the cultural experiences that they have and their of their ancestors. It is important to remember that 2020 was nominated the year of the rural uh, tourism development of by the WTO with the intent to create awareness and support the development of the rural tourism and to promote open tourism on the natural resources that is mostly coveted in the new reality that we have within the pandemic. That's why to improve a community tourism offering is a responsibility and a need for all of us who work in the chain value of our industry, value chain of our industry. We work in Ecuador from the base fruits, and we promote the plurality as our as a guaranteed destination and the eventual experiences for those who really like to experience, to have memorable experiences and a connection with the peoples and cultural practices. We have also implemented the Magical Peoples program with the methodology that Mexico has been implementing. We also have six emblematic products that are immersed in the community-based tourism and that should be empowered within the domestic market.
I believe we've lost the minister.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. We have. I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Minister.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about the products that we
Me
have.
refería a los productos que tenemos. Cocoa, bananas, tuna, the thatch hats and shrimps. All of this is part of the work agenda that our government portfolio has in trying to enjoy, to make people enjoy the four worlds Equatorian experience. Thank you.
That introduction. And with that, we'll dive right into the meat of our discussion. I would like to hand it over now to my colleague, Anthony Rodman, for the questions on the private sector within Indigenous tourism. Over to you, Anthony.
Sure, thank you, Kim. Many of the panelists just a bit ago referred to alliances and to partnerships. And I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about the partnerships with the private sector, with academic institutions, with NGOs to help support Indigenous tourism development. If any of you could talk a little bit about those type of partnerships and how that is supporting Indigenous tourism development, that would be great. Perhaps we could start with Minister Valdez.
Gracias. Sí, aquí, bueno, como lo decía desde el principio.
Thank you. As I was saying before, the strategic alliances and partnerships are essential to be able to promote the indigenous tourism within the Association of the Mayan World. I want to highlight what Belize has done, that has launched a special program on tourism, and they have forged some many important associations with the private sector in El Salvador. We're also working on that. I will always say that COVID-19 has changed our life and has given us the opportunity to go back to our roots and work with the indigenous communities. So we are working hand in hand with the governmental institutions, and I will highlight on the interinstitutional collaboration. That is a key role that the Ministry of Culture has through its programs. We are working for that. In the future, the indigenous tourism uh, will become a foundation of tourism. We have also forged some guidelines regarding this topic, and we have fostered the creation of businesses within the private sector that could provide the services associated to this industry, and in the same way create jobs associated to this. We also created a plan to address the impact on or due to COVID-19, directed especially to indigenous businesses um, and entrepreneurs, especially in Mexico. So we need to learn from the good experiences Mexico, Belize, and other countries have created, and analyze how we can connect to that ideas and make the multi destination tourism. Many times we as countries do not recommend one another, so we need to forge that alliance as well. And as I said before, the importance of the connection within each institution in the country, and also work alongside as countries to provide an experience to our international visitors, our international tourism, and give them tools to be able to visit our countries that have such an interesting story, such interesting origins. As we were saying before, Latin America exists, and each country has a very interesting story to tell.
Thank you so much, Minister. That insight about learning from each other, learning from the different countries. Hopefully, we are helping to push that and achieve that at this forum. Minister Eskildsen, could we hear from you about the partnerships in the private sector and NGOs, academic institutions for Indigenous tourism?
For sure. Thank you. For us, it's a pleasure to share these exciting moments with which we are living. And speaking about partnerships, certainly that's part of the base of our strategy, in the sense that we have just created a new executive decree signed by our President Cortizo, President Laurentino Cortizo in Panama, less than a month ago, creating an alliance called the Tourism Conservation Research Alliance, which reactivates a strategy that was developed over 20 years ago in Panama, but was not continued. In this case, it provides sort of the platform to create these alliances, and our indigenous tourism circuit, which I mentioned before, will be a priority in development of these alliances. The alliances that we have started working with, first of all, we worked with the National Council for the Integral Development of Indigenous People. For the first time in our history, as Authority of Tourism, we presented at this Indigenous Panama circuit to the council that has a representation of the 7 indigenous groups of Panama and the 12 traditional authorities. So for us, it was an extreme pleasure and a very exciting moment to have that historical moment when we first approached this Indigenous Council in Panama. And after that, we have been reaching the agreement with each individual of the traditional authorities, and also incorporating relationship with our Association of Tourism, Sustainable Tourism, which is a private association in Panama. This association has been also prioritizing the development on community tourism with indigenous groups. So in this way, we are definitely working together with our private sector. Also in Panama, we have a very strong presence of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. It's been in Panama for over 100 years because of when the Panama Canal was built, this US entity established in Panama, and they have a very, very interesting set of research, especially on our pre-Columbian cultures, and rightly so, our indigenous Panama circuit, tourism circuit, starts with the pre-Columbian period. So we have actually very interesting archaeological excavations that are based on are creating more and more of this research. So now this is a tourism experience that we connect with the live indigenous cultures. So these are a few of the partnerships we are working with. So we are very certain that we will be able to see results of this experience and this of the creation of these partnerships in soon time. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Those are very exciting developments that you shared, especially the connection with the National Council, the Indigenous Council that you referenced. Fantastic. Perhaps next we can go to Minister Prado de Holguín. Minister, I believe you might be on mute.
Okay. El turismo indígena forma parte.
Okay, the indigenous tourism makes part not only of the touristic offer of Ecuador, but also of its own identity due to the acknowledgement the Ministry of Tourism has given to the community centers. These are spaces for development that provide activities and also accommodation services. There are many community circuits that make part of the offer, of the touristic offer of Ecuador. Many are located in the Amazonian and the Andes in indigenous communities. There are also initiatives from these high-level community institutions like Napo Wildlife Center that got a World Travel Award and was based on a local initiative of the National Park of Yanisuni. So the indigenous tourism is very, very important in our country.
Thank you so much, Minister. Secretary Flute, would you like to share your experience with developing partnerships to support indigenous tourism?
Sure, thank you. You know, so my experience, I would have to share from the position that I held prior to the position I'm currently in, and that was being the tribal chairman for my tribe, and also serving the pleasure of the board of directors for what is called the United Tribes of North Dakota. And in the early onset of our individual tribes visiting and talking about tourism, and some doing you know, a little bit of the tourism industry themselves, our experience, again speaking from a tribal chairman's perspective, was working with George Washington and their assistance, and being open to becoming an alliance, creating an alliance and a partnership. I've got to give credit to our tribes for being open-minded, not letting politics get in the way of the mission of creating tourism, and for George Washington being there to help facilitate and bridge some of the communications that we hadn't had otherwise. And so that partnership and that alliance with George Washington helped the North Dakota Tourism Alliance, and is also helping the South Dakota Tourism Alliance. And so it's those types of partnerships that have not just bridged or strengthened, they have strengthened a communication gap between our tribes. And that's all part of opportunity to grow our individual tourism industries, but also in working with each other to support one another and enhancing each other's unique history and what other tribes have to offer to giving that visitor an enhanced experience. So, you know, the other part with state and local governments, I know with local government right in my backyard on my tribe, the local government has been very supportive in networking, marketing, branding, and doing what they can, because when we work together, it just brings, you know, a better result. When we're working against each other because of, you know, political indifferences, nobody gets anywhere. And so I was very happy to see that, you know, our state and our local governments are helping our tribes in the best they can. But, you know, the other part of it is too, is that our tribal people and our tribal tourism people have they have a tough job too. But it's important to be at the table to have an open discussion on how to further strengthen the partnerships that have previously been established, and to work through those challenges together and not against each other.
Thank you, Secretary Flute, and especially for that message of togetherness, I think is very timely, and for sharing your experience as a tribal leader as well. Minister Frederick, would you like to comment on your experience in the partnerships that help support Indigenous tourism?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah. So where I sit as a parliamentarian, and I also sit as the minister for the Indigenous community. And I have a wonderful partnership with our local tribal council, because the Indigenous territory where I hail from is served by both a parliamentary representative and a tribal chief. And so it's a local government authority, and we have had positive partnerships from the onset. We see them as equal partners. As a matter of fact, the government of Dominica has established that there shall be no development without the prior consent of the tribal council. So it is set in our policies that tourism-related activities, along with all of the other government initiatives, will not proceed within that space without the tribal council's intervention and also their advice. So we have a wonderful partnership here with the tribal council. Also, the Ministry of Tourism itself as an entity of government is a positive partner. As a matter of fact, we have proceeded to have a representation of the Indigenous community within the Ministry of Tourism. So there's a specialized officer within the Ministry of Tourism who is that sort of liaison with the tourism departments and the Indigenous community. We also have a wonderful partnership with and I spoke to it earlier on, with the Living Museum, because it is administered by the Ministry of Tourism, however, managed by the Indigenous population. So the manager of the site is an Indigenous person, Kalinago person. All the staff are of Indigenous heritage. So while the Ministry of Tourism has the overall authority to guide within the structures of government, it is operated by the Indigenous community. We do have a hotel and tourism association here on the island, and we also have positive partnerships with them. It goes along the lines of having workshops, consultations, advice, and this is a wonderful experience. They operate as a private entity, an NGO out of the government circles, but we do have that collaboration with them. There's also a most wonderful collaboration with the Community Tourism Association, because there's a National Tourism Association, and and the focus have now shifted a bit, I must say, to the indigenous population, because we have argued that the foundation of the tourism product within the island has to be from the First Peoples. So there's this wonderful partnership. So the tribal council, the NGOs, the tourism departments all have very, very good working relationships with our ministry here, and I can foresee that without the intervention of political bias and political troubles that Comrade Flute alluded to, we could do a lot more. I think within a small nation state, it's what is important, because the island of Dominica in itself is one community. So I'm very excited for the positive relations between those agencies.
Thank you for sharing those successful partnerships, Minister Frederick, and for highlighting that policy that you have for the prior and informed consent for the development. Very interesting, thank you. Kim, I would like to turn it back to you to continue our discussion. That sounds good to you?
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. I am very much enjoying hearing what is coming out of all ministers and the partnerships that are being established that are so critical to fostering and building tourism as a whole, but more importantly, tourism within the context of our indigenous communities. Very encouraging. And now what I would like to do is shift a little bit to governments and government participation. We've heard about partnerships with NGOs, with the private sector, but governments have a specific role within this context. And I would like to hear from ministers as to how governments are supporting indigenous communities, fostering indigenous tourism, building community tourism in particular. And I would like to begin this discussion by, again, starting with the minister from Ecuador. We know that you have a very rich community tourism ecosystem. How are you supporting indigenous tourism in particular in Ecuador? Minister Holguín, over to you.
Thank you, Kim. And I want to turn around in English because I was having some trouble in getting the information. Okay, the thing is that here in Ecuador, we have more or less 400 community centers that are included in the Ministry of Tourism, and we have a very special connection with them. And there is a tourism that has more than 40 years that the thing was established in our country. So there is a lot of experience in that respect. So we have worked together. We have a lot of help. We have made a lot of partnerships in Ecuador, especially with the universities, with the academy, with the international ONGs like GISZ from Germany, and we have held very much connection with them. They have a very nice organization, so they work together. They are part of the council of the Ministry of Tourism, so are very considerate in the administration of what tourism means for the whole country. So they are included in our promotion efforts, and we have a very good number of tourists that visit Ecuador, especially the community centers. So the government, what we did and this time is work together with them and prepare a special biosecurity protocol for directly, exclusively for the community centers and the whole country. So in that respect, we have a very close relation with them, and we work together, and we are expecting that all the services are growing. Right now, they have more than 400 community centers, and we want them to grow more and receive all the incentives, whatever is necessary, and the support to still become better and better tourism establishments. Yes.
Thank you, Minister, and your leadership has been stellar in that regard. We appreciate the work that you're doing with us and the work that you're doing in Ecuador. I would like to ask the same question of Minister Frederick. Minister, Dominica was one of the first countries in the Caribbean region to establish, or the first country, I should say, to establish a Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment. Could you give us some insight as to how the government is supporting the indigenous community, how the government is promoting and supporting indigenous tourism in particular?
Yeah, so for sure, the island, 40 years of independence from colonial exploitation, a thriving indigenous heritage that was part of the Creole culture. It appears that the government in 2000 really took on the role of governance to another level, and therein established, first of all, the Department of Kalinago Affairs, which subsequently converted into an entire ministry. So it shows the government's commitment to honor aspects of the indigenous heritage. Very, very important here. And what we have done here is we do have an authority that do a lot of the marketing of the island, called the Discover Dominica Authority, DDA. And this authority, as an arm of government, have always worked in tandem with the indigenous community to ensure that the right message goes out, and there's a proper representation of the aspects of the heritage. And it's important to say that because there was a view at a particular point of our history that there were no more indigenous peoples in Dominica. That was that view. And also there's a view that because of the almost complete annihilation of the indigenous people, we have lost a lot of aspects of our heritage. So the language was affected, our spirituality was affected. And all of this appeared to be assimilated into the normal Dominica culture. But we have done a lot of work, and the government is giving a different priority to the indigenous movement. And as a matter of fact, I will tell you that my Prime Minister has alluded to the fact that he is of indigenous heritage. He hails from a community that was one of the first settlements of indigenous people on the island. So he has that commitment, and the partnership has to grow from there. And so we are at a crossroads right now. We have been offered that sort of leeway by leadership to do more, and we are moving beyond the what I have termed the complaining phase, and seeing others should do for us. And we are now taking on the role to do for ourselves, because as we speak, we have an opportunity to do all of those things. So with the tribal council, like I speak to earlier on, we're doing our best to ensure that there's a sort of rebranding, that we are able to maximize the tourist dollar, as we say in the Caribbean region, and to ensure that the right message goes out, and that we really do get the benefits of the tourism industry, because we have argued that without the Kalinago heritage, the indigenous heritage, the product would be lesser. So we are very appreciative for the intervention of the government. And I sit here also as a politician, and before that, in my previous life as a historian, cultural activist, I saw the aligning of the government's policies toward making indigenous heritage more prevalent. And I'm happy that we are doing that, and we're progressing and move forward. And while we are on the trajectory to building one of the first climate resilient countries, also, it is hinged directly on the indigenous heritage. We have lived in these lands for thousands of years. We know we have been faced with numerous troublesome situations brought on by natural disasters and brought on by an invading force from a so-called more civilized part of the world. But we have endured, we have lived through it, we have that living and working knowledge, and we are now given the opportunity to share with the government, and we are appreciative of that, and we are mindful that we have much more, not only to offer to the island itself, but to humanity. So we're happy for that opportunity.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I would like to ask the same question of the Minister of El Salvador. Minister Valdez, how is the government supporting tourism, indigenous communities in general? If you could give us your perspective on that, that would be fantastic. Minister?
Con gusto, gracias Kim. Definitivamente es
Gladly, thank you, King. Definitely, this forum will leave us great knowledge. We are listening to all the leaders of our region. Uh, this is Alberto Cruz, the general director of one of the areas of the Ministry of Culture that can answer your question because I have to leave the meeting. But I assure you he is able to provide us more information. As I was saying, we are working alongside, hand in hand, and one of the things we are working on, as many of us know, and many times the organizations we are aligned to are not always representing the best interest, in the best interest, the communities, the indigenous communities. So I will leave you with him. I will insist again on the interinstitutionality as a member of the public sector for quite some years now. This is the first time we are working like this, connecting one sector with the other, and we're working with the sector of agriculture, also with other entities like the administration that is providing the water in these indigenous communities, also the treatment of water. So we are working in a comprehensive manner because that's what the president has um, asked us to do. That is one of the things we are working on, and especially identifying and being proud of the identity of our indigenous communities. El Salvador, as not as the other countries in the region, have been closed for a lot of years, and we weren't able to maintain our cultural identity for quite some time. So I will leave you with him that is in charge of providing the support to the indigenous communities and also to provide some knowledge about the indigenous communities here in El Salvador. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be able to be here and share some things with you today. I want to mention some key elements, as the minister has said, is the articulated job we are making to do things together and in that way to do things better. That is one of the principles. And another one, especially in matter of indigenous communities, is the territorial work. We cannot interfere in a positive manner in the communities if we do not identify the matters, the issues in each of the communities and their needs. It is important to set a dialogue, an open dialogue with the indigenous communities and also with the organizations. In that way, an important factor that should be considered, and I speak about this from the international human rights, is the previously informed projects. Any projects that would like to be established in a region will always need to be authorized by the communities. The communities will have a voice saying what type of tourism, what type of activities they want to provide, what type of services they want to provide the visitors for their experience. Coming back to the interinstitutional work that, as she was saying, is vital for us to be able to to offer a proper touristic offer, it is important to work in coordination within the indigenous communities and create a sustainable development. The government of El Salvador, and to mention just a few, we are developing a project of um, productivity in 5 different municipalities with indigenous communities. This is a key element is to identify which communities are self-determined as indigenous. The process is very slow for those communities to self-acknowledge themselves as indigenous, because in the past, being indigenous in El Salvador was quite complicated. So in that sense, there are some communities that now have self-acknowledged themselves, and they are promoting some projects of productivity and development, and we are looking for diversified projects related to food, to crafts, and many other elements that are looking, or that could be helpful to make an approach and bring together those communities according to the support these communities are obtaining. So I think that would be a way to positively impact on the indigenous communities.
But to the Honorable David Flute, Secretary from the South Dakota, if you could give us an idea of how your government, or how the government is supporting the indigenous communities develop their tourism infrastructure. Secretary Flute.
You know, thank you. You know, during my time as tribal chairman, our government, the United States government, passed what is called the Native Act, and that is the Native American Tourism and Improving Visitor Experience Act. And so what that did is it created law and recognized our tribes in the U.S. as having an opportunity to, to create tourism. It provided them opportunities to apply for grants, just as they would for other state tourism or other private industry tourism, industries, and so businesses. And I know it can be competitive at times, but I think it was it's the first step in the right direction, and that's got to be valued by everybody within our tribal nations, that there is a federal law that has established this for our tribes. And the other part of it is that with the NEA, the National Endowment Association, that's a federal agency, National Endowment for Arts and Humanities. There are dollars out there. There is funding out there in different agencies within the federal government. There's dollars out there within the state government, and there's dollars out there within the tribal government. And so I think on all three levels, state, tribal, and federal, there is opportunities that the three different governments have provided opportunities for tribes, for the small business owner that is getting into tourism. We have a lot of opportunity here, but it's again, I can't stress it enough. And it's something Minister Frederick had said here too, that I'd like to just kind of comment on a little bit about doing it ourselves. And that's it's the same thing as when we talk of self-governance and being sovereign nations. For our tribes in the United States, we are a nation within a nation. That's how the federal government recognizes us. And so using and applying our sovereign status in a way that is respectfully recognize it's happened. I mean, I know there's challenges out there today, but you know, it's up to us to either focus and engage all of our energy on things that we have no control over, or we focus our energy and our talents and our skills, and speaking specifically to our group of Indigenous tourism, you know, we focus on tourism. And I think that's where the challenge is right now. But as a former chairman, as a tribal member of a tribe, working for both a tribal government and the state government, I'm happy with the level of recognition, acknowledgement, and opportunity that our government has provided to our tribes. As Minister Frederick had said, it's up to us. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's up to us to do the work, to put in the work. We have to put in the work. We have to do it ourselves. And I'm encouraged by that. And I would hope that those listening out there would be encouraged by that too, that is the epitome of self-governance. It's not just, you know, expecting our tribal government to give us, you know, the funding, because in tourism, it takes funding. I mean, it's got to be funded. You know, you got offices, you have marketing, you have branding, you have communications. There's people have got to be paid. And so that's what, you know, I know what tribal tourism for our tribes is here to give that visitor an enhanced experience, but it's also to create revenue. And that's being self-governance. You're being, you know, you're being sovereign in that. But I think a lot of times it's misinterpreted that money is just going to come out from somebody and they're going to help. And so getting back to, you know, the question, what our government has did, I think on all three levels, tribal, state, and federal, our governments have provided opportunities for our tribes. Is there more we can do? Absolutely, all the time. So, but I just wanted to share that. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Flute. And we're quickly running out of time. The discussion is very rich. I would like to hand it over now to Morgan for the last round of questions. Morgan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we only have about 6 minutes left, but I do want to pose one last question to our esteemed panel here to close this session. And given your role and your country's experience with Indigenous tourism, what advice would you give to fellow leaders to help promote Indigenous tourism in their area? Basically, what has worked really well for you? If you could just share one piece of advice or one experience that worked really well, and then we'll close for that. Maybe we'll go to the Minister of Panama to start.
Thank you, Morgan. It's a pleasure. Advice to fellow leaders. I think with our Indigenous groups, certainly the best advice would be to have a friendly, close approach. In Panama, we have not had a great experience in the past because our Indigenous leaders have had somehow this impression that leaders in the past did not do this approach in a very friendly way. So they thought that the leaders were sort of imposing. So, and actually in Panama, there's even a law that requires that any programs developed with Indigenous communities have to be with their consent and their involvement, right? So this has proven very successful results so far in this year and 3 months that we've been working, because they believe it's a sort of genuine interest. Because I think in all human relationships, this is something you can somehow perceive right away once the approach is made, and in general what the real intentions are, right? So in general, I think the approach being on a human manner and always putting at the forefront of the intentions, the idea of preserving the culture, of not imposing any of this, if you may call it the Western way, right? Because the whole idea is to preserve these traditions, these millenary cultural elements. We are, for example, also identifying how worldwide it is already acknowledged that indigenous cultures throughout the world are the guardians of nature, for example. And now this is something that is a benefit. You know, maybe 20 years ago, 50 years ago, the way development was looked at, people thought, you know, build and destroy nature was maybe the way things were done. Now we're understanding the grave and terrible repercussions that this approach to nature has given us, and how indigenous cultures have had the wisdom on how to treat nature rightly in the first place, right? So the idea of recognizing indigenous cultures as guardians of nature, and having that be also part of the attraction, in the sense that tourists today want to get in contact with authentic experiences, as we said before. So all in all, this is the idea of how we have perceived that this approach has been successful, and this will be the advice that we would share to other leaders.
Thank you so much, Minister Eskildsen. Minister Prado de Holguín.
Yes, thank you. The advice that we can give is that in these times after the pandemic, the COVID-19, the most important thing is to help the small communities to have e-commerce. That's what we're working also with giving them the opportunity to sell themselves, to provide a way that it will be very easy to make connections, make reservations, confirm spaces, and receive the payments for that. So there's a lot of work that we have to do it together with them. They already have all, as Minister Eskildsen said, that they have the wisdom to maintain all the properties, maintain the nature that they have. They are in charge of those. But the most important now in these times, difficult times, is the way that they can be in touch with the buyers, with the people that want to visit them, and give all the facilities, so the visit those communities will be much easier and will be better for them. And we will try to fund them, because that's the most important thing in this moment. So we're working together in a digital new science for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. Minister Frederick.
So yes, colleagues, I think we are on point here. It's very productive. My sole advice, based on what my experience as an indigenous person myself, we have to take on a grassroots approach. Indigenous populations are very wary about researchers and consultants. I think just people, we have concerns of people who are researching our culture. We have concerns about people who are consulting and providing a framework for us. So it has to be, the advice is to get the indigenous communities involved from the onset. It has to be a grassroots movement rather than leadership from on top.
Yes, thank you so much. And the representative, sir, from El Salvador. I think you might be on mute.
Ok, bien, quizás como consejo.
As an advice, I build on the idea of the former speaker. The consultation process has to come from the grassroots level. Nothing can be imposed. Everything needs to have a consensus, the consent of everyone, respecting the the willingness of the territories. That should be the basic thing. And I also share what has been said before. in regards with the awareness that the indigenous peoples are the guardians of the natural richness that we have in our planet. Particularly, it is also important to respect the natural richness in the community because it is an element that that distinguishes, that is distinct for these indigenous peoples, and we have been in charge historically of preserving them, and it has to be valued. Any effort that needs to be done in the tourism sector has to be in total, with total respect of our tradition, of the traditions of our peoples. And I believe that the community itself will also be willing to support any effort as long as it all has a consent and it's made on a basis of respect towards the tradition of the peoples.
Thank you so much. And then Secretary Flute to close us out real quick, and then we'll turn it to Kim, please.
Yeah, thank you. Advice from me, very, very quickly. I'll be brief. When it comes to tourism on a broad spectrum, we've got to work together with other tourism offices, whether they be state, national parks, and work with them through our consultation processes. But I just want to say very briefly, best advice I could give is to anybody listening, and I say this respectfully, leave the politics to the politicians, leave the legal issues to the attorneys, and leave indigenous tourism to the indigenous people.
Excellent. Thank you. Kim.
Fantastic, fantastic advice to end from all. Leave the indigenous, the business of indigenous tourism to indigenous people. I think we can end very positively on that note. The idea of ensuring that we respect indigenous cultures, respect indigenous people, the idea to have the generation of ideas and activities and programs be grassroots and come from within the community. I think that is very important. I want to treat each and every one of our ministers to continue the dialogue that we had today. I think there was insufficient time to delve into so many issues that we could have talked about. So I hope that going forward, ministers who are all part of the Inter-American community, who are all engaged within the context of the Inter-American Travel and Tourism Congress that is housed within the context of the OAS, that we create a special space for continuing that dialogue and that discussion on indigenous tourism. We have had the ministers of tourism convene before. The Congress has a very long history, but I commit to you as the Secretary for Development at the OAS to ensure that we are treating with specifically the issue of indigenous tourism within the broader discussions that we're having on tourism as an inter-American family. Again, my thanks to the George Washington University, my thanks to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for this collaboration. We at the OAS could not have asked for a better partnership. I'm very grateful for the continued dialogue, the continued friendship, the continued relationship that we're building here this week, with the hope that we can see some concrete results as far as indigenous tourism goes in the Americas. My thanks again to Minister Eskildsen from Panama. My thanks to Senora Valdez of El Salvador, to Minister Holguín of Ecuador, to Secretary Flute, thank you so much, and to my dear fellow Dominican, Minister Frederick of Dominica. Again, we are open to continuing the dialogue within the context of the OAS, and we welcome your participation in the discussions among ministers so that we do not lose focus on this most important issue. And special thanks to my co-moderator, Morgan, for joining in the session today. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone, I'm going to ask the ministers just for 1 second to look at your cameras. I'm going to take a picture and then we can all log off. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Give me 1 sec. Okay, another one. Perfect. Everyone's smiling. Thank you all so much.
Take care.
Everyone. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, ministers. Thank you, Morgan. Bye, everyone.
For the rest of the attendees,